FinCEN Files was a global corporation led by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, where I work, and in partnership with BuzzFeed News and 108 total media organizations around the world, 400 journalists, 88 countries, into, in a word, the role of global banks in the perpetuation of money laundering. And this investigation was a breakthrough in a lot of ways, mostly because it focused on the actual role that global banks play. JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, Standard Chartered, Deutsche Bank, and others. These are name brand banks that actually play in perpetuating and profiting from the laundering of money that ultimately belongs to corrupt oligarchs, drug cartels, terror groups, and financial criminals. And that's why this is a breakthrough. And one of the reasons we were able to accomplish this was because we were able to obtain document from a very secretive intelligence agency within the US Treasury Department, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. That's why the project's called the FinCEN Files. FinCEN Files are largely reports known as suspicious activity reports that global banks file when they suspect laundered money is moving through their accounts. The U.S. has a very privileged position in the world because of the preeminence of the U.S. dollar as the global currency of trade, global reserve currency, and any dollar transaction in the world is essentially performed in the United States, basically in New York. The global banks are required by law to try and prevent money laundering and to report their suspicions to FinCEN. The FinCEN files were obtained by our partner, BuzzFeed News, and shared with us and the global partners. BuzzFeed says that many of the records were produced in response to requests from congressional committees investigating Russian interference in the 2016 US presidential election, while BuzzFeed tells us that others were gathered in response to law enforcement requests. They were shared with us, and we took it and all of us together went from there. What we discovered was that, in fact, banks, while they may report these transactions to FinCEN, they also continue to transmit dirty money, as we found, as much more than $2 trillion worth. And often these suspicious activity reports were submitted long after the fact, long after the money had already been transmitted, and only after news reports emerged about the parties in the case and the parties to the transaction. Litigation occurred, publicly revealing that these parties were actually involved in illegal activity and money laundering. We found also, it was quite a data project, and which took a lot of doing, but we found also that that in about half the cases, or at least half the reports, the global banks who were entrusted with protecting the financial system didn't know who the parties were for which they were doing the transaction. And we also tried to tie this perpetuation of the flow of dirty money to the profits that banks are able to generate, both by payment fees that they collect, by dint of their privileged access to the U.S. dollar, to the dollars that in their via their accounts at the U.S. Federal Reserve, and by serving ultra high net worth individuals through private banking. The project was an enormous undertaking. It took 16 months. There were, like I said, 400 reporters working around the world. Each, you know, the way our system works, ICIJ's system works is we get the data, we try and structure it, clean it, make it usable, make it searchable, and then make it available on a secure platform for journalists around the world. Each newspaper, our partners are all of the world's leading news organizations, the BBC, Le Monde, NBC. Our principal partner in this case was BuzzFeed News in New York. Everyone around the world, reporters work diligently looking for stories that are of particular interest to their home country. Our partner in Hungary is Direct 36, and they had some terrific stories about Hungary related money laundering. Our role as ICIJ, as the leader of the global investigation, is to coordinate this entire affair, which included a meeting in person in Hamburg, Germany, back in a long time ago, to get everyone together and on the same page, and also to make sure that everyone has access to and understands and training in researching and analyzing these documents. And we wrote a series of stories. Our main focus was the big picture, essentially the role that global banks play in laundered money. And I think that's why this project hit with such force. Global bank stocks all fell sharply on the day after the initial publication of the shares, because I think that the markets and I think policy experts in general, and I think even people who participate at the highest levels of the anti-money laundering system, suspect that this system is unsustainable and it doesn't work. Experts have estimated that as much as 99% of all dirty money actually makes it through the global banks undetected and unchecked. And all of this and our project essentially confirms that our worst fears about essentially the failure of the global anti-money laundering system. And our project, I think, raises some really, I think, brings into sharp relief some really pointed questions. Essentially, these are questions for FinCEN and for the U.S. Treasury Department and for Congress. And one of the questions is, and for obviously for global banks, one of the questions is, if you care so much about money laundering as you suggest, why would you perform a transaction for an anonymous account belonging to some, owned by some shell company? You have no idea who owns them. And for FinCEN, if money laundering is such a priority, why do you allow banks to process transactions from anonymous accounts? And there aren't any really good answers to that. And we hear a lot about these tax havens around the world that come under a lot of criticism, justifiable, for allowing anonymous corporations like British Virgin Islands or Mauritius or the UK or Seychelles or the Isle of Man, and all of these tax havens, and they're supposed to be, and they all come under global opprobrium for allowing this kind of secrecy. But my question And our question that I think our project raises is, you know, why do you even bank them? Why do you allow these anonymous companies registered in these corporations registered in these tax havens that are supposedly so bad? Why do you allow their accounts owned by these corporations to go through your bank? And wouldn't it just be simpler to just disallow those transactions and make them incorporate in a place where they have to reveal the ultimate beneficial owner? Look, money laundering is what they call a second level crime. It's indirect in the sense that it's what you do after you commit the original crime, whether it might be looting the public treasury of Ukraine, or moving drugs from Latin America into the United States and the cash back out, or scamming victims with Ponzi schemes, or funding terror. But it's important, I think, for the layperson to understand that money laundering is essentially the lifeblood of all these activities. And I think it's really important, particularly we're here in Central Europe, where a lot of, and Eastern Europe, where a lot of democracies are struggling. It's grand industrial scale public corruption is essentially would not be possible without the aid and role of global banks in helping move these dollars back and forth between shell companies that ultimately would be hidden in legitimate accounts to be spent by the people who stole the money. So while money laundering may seem like it's a bloodless crime, it's far from it. In fact, it essentially enables a lot of the human suffering and the destabilization of governments and democracies around the world. And the closer you look at the system, as we did here, the more you realize that this is not particularly complicated, and it's not even particularly that particularly difficult to stop. Once you understand the mechanics of it, it's about creating a political environment where the simple steps you could take to stop banking anonymous account holders around the world is done, and that would be the first step toward reforming a system that basically everyone agrees doesn't work. So that's sort of the main sort of takeaway from that I took away from this project, and why I think it's important for everybody to kind of connect to the importance of money laundering. Essentially, it enables a lot of the activities that are destabilizing the world today, and that's why I thought this was an important project.